Hey y'all, I'm Jim. Welcome to Sunrise Farm. In today's video, I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the trial and error growing techniques that I'm using, both in row spacing and from row to row spacing. Some of it intentional, some of it a little unintentional, and I'll explain that in a minute. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that I'm a big proponent of trial and error growing methods. Even if you've been doing something for 20, 30, 40 years and it's working great, all right, fine. But what if it could even be better? You never know. Um, so what I've got here is, first of all, I always use drip tape irrigation. So everything that I do trial and error wise will be based on the fact that I'm doing drip tape irrigation. Most of my drip tape is 1 foot on center emitter spacing. So that's 12-inch emitter spacing. I am going to be purchasing very soon some 4-inch on center emitter spacing, and that's going to be more for smaller root vegetables such as carrots and when I plant onions and garlic, beets, this type of thing. But for the most part, it's either going to be one or the other. Either I'm going to be using 12-inch emitter spacing or I'm going to be using 4-inch. I don't even have any 4-inch right now, so everything you'll see is on 12-inch. That right there is a double row of squash, and that is 1 foot by 1 foot grid, meaning it's planted on every emitter 1 foot apart, and it's 1 foot apart because it's 6 inches off of either side of that one piece of drip tape. So it's literally in a 1 square foot area, 4 plants. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll bring you in a little closer in a minute and show you. But so far, those plants are thriving, and I find no problem whatsoever in doing that. I've never seen anybody else do it. There probably has been, I'm sure. But so anyway, in this 40-foot row, I have 80 plants. So basically I have, in essence, 80 plus row feet of plants, depending on how people grow them, in a 40-foot section. Now they're right next to a double row of okra planted the exact same way, 1 foot by 1 foot grid, or 4 plants per square foot. And they're thriving as well, and they're thriving together. Now you can see in the middle that there's basically no room to walk in between these two rows. That part was a little accidental, and what I mean by a little accidental is this plot was already set up with 3-foot row spacing with my drip tape. So when I was able to take out the previous crops and clean up the row spacing for these, I didn't change the row spacing. Now going forward, if I was to do a double row of squash and a double row of zucchini, or even like I've done here with a double row of okra, plants that are bigger, fuller, and bushier, I would at least go to 4-foot row spacing. So I don't think 3-foot row spacing is very good, at least not for these type of plants. But let me bring you in a little closer and I'll show you just how good they're doing. I've highlighted in some of my early season videos about my trouble with the squash and zucchini that I had. And so when I was able to do this succession planting of squash, when I did it this way, and of course it's in a different plot than the first round, but when I did it this way, wow, we're getting squash no problem. We're getting it continuously and we're getting it in abundance. But let me bring you in a little closer and show you, and then I'll show you a couple other trial and error spots I've got, just to see what's going to happen with those growing techniques as well. So let me walk you down the rows and give you a little closer look. So these things are very lush, very green, very growing very full. No problem with this planting style for sure. So if y'all happen to grow on drip tape, I highly recommend you trying a double row planting of squash. And if you've done it before, let me know what your results have been. And here's the double row of okra. They're doing great. I just got finished harvesting okra. And they're doing awesome. All right, so here's the 1-4-foot raised bed, 4 foot wide that is, by 50 foot long by 2 foot high raised bed that I do have finished. I'm getting ready to start back into them here in the next couple of weeks. Since our July and August growing season will slow down slightly in the garden itself, I'm going to go back to working on some raised beds. But I've set up the first 20 feet or so of this raised bed with some experimentation growing techniques just to see A, how things grow in here, but also B, how they're going to grow in spacing wise. So let me bring you in a little closer, but I have okra, a few cantaloupe, zucchini, and some Marglobe determinate tomatoes. But I'll bring you in a little closer and show you. All right, first up, we just have a few cantaloupe plants, and they're starting to vine out. This was just merely because I had a few leftover plants. Not even sure how healthy they are to grow out, but we're going to see. They are starting to put on a couple of flowers, so that's a good sign. But I was just going to let them grow, and I'm going to let them grow off the raised bed and see how they do. In this particular case, I don't want them to grow in the raised bed, although that's an option going forward when I have more raised beds. Here are some okra plants, and I have spaced them just like I showed you over there in the ground. I have spaced them 1 foot apart on the midders and 1 foot apart inside the bed. I do have the bed lined with 4 water lines just to kind of cover the bed itself, the spacing. And we're going to see how they grow. You know, obviously okra plants grow extremely tall, 6, 7, 8 feet in a lot of cases, and they get real bushy if you let them, if you don't prune them up. I probably will prune them up in this raised bed. And down here in the south, again, I live in South Carolina, Zone 8B, lower part of South Carolina. But even though we can grow okra a long time in the season, meaning I could let these get 6, 7, 8 feet high, it is generally better for us just to succession plant them. So when they get about 5 feet high, I would have already started a whole nother round of them. And so it won't be that big a deal, if you will, for them to grow 5 feet high in a 2 foot high raised bed. I can reach 7 feet, no problem. So a lot of this is based on what the plant will do and knowing what I can do with it in general reach. I don't really want to use a ladder to harvest, but I am thinking, kind of outside the box on what I can do here. Let's move over and look at the zucchini and the tomatoes. All right, so what you see before you is zucchini plants, and I have planted them basically the same way I showed you that squash, 1 foot apart on emitters, and then 1 foot apart, which would technically be a double row of zucchini. I will fully admit these plants were 2 weeks past their prime in my grow out trays, and so their growth habit might be a little stunted. Don't know how well they'll do. Unfortunately, I wasn't able, because of being sick for a while, I wasn't able to get the ground prep fast enough to get them out of my trays when I should have, or they'd have been in the actual ground. But I'm also just started another round, and I'm going to continue to experiment with fresh, good plants when they're supposed to be planted and see a different result. I figured I had this raised bed kind of starting to be retuned, and I didn't want to waste the plants, or at least I wanted to try this experiment to see what would happen. So there you go. Now over here are some determinate Marglobe tomato plants. So what I've done here is I've got Basically, if you were to imagine a single row of drip tape being down the middle, which would be kind of sort of normally the way I would plant them in the ground, it would be double spacing, meaning a double row, but it would be an offset double row. So this emitter over here is about 16 inches away from this emitter over here, but if it was down the middle and that emitter was here and here, it would be the same thing. So it's an offset double row, meaning I could have used one piece of drip tape to do a planting like this. However, again, these things can get 5, 6, 7 feet high, and I can control that height-wise as far as harvesting. What I'm going to do to trellis the tomatoes in this raised bed, to be blunt, I haven't totally figured that one out yet, or how I want to try it. But at any rate, I wanted to see how these grew in this big raised bed and see if any of these growing techniques are something that I like, want to do, not want to do, made a mistake, what have you. One thing about using raised beds, clearly, I have the depth, I have leaf mulch compost in here, and I can control the weeds way better in here than I can in the ground right now. So, plus it's way easier on my back and things like that. So we'll see. This is kind of a stay tuned and we'll come back to it theory. But so far the plants are doing good. They need a little water today, which I'm going to do later this evening. But so far the plants are looking good. So let me bring you to the last trial on some bell peppers we're doing. And yeah, we'll see how things are going. All right, so here are my bell pepper plants. Most of them are growing quite awesome. We've been harvesting bell peppers for a few weeks now. Some plants are a little more stunted than others. This happens to catch the end of that, if you've watched some of my previous videos, that bad river or whatever you want to call it of land that I'm going to be getting tested before I replant. But the most of the bell peppers are doing awesome. I think I ended up planting about 120. I probably have lost, I don't know, 10 to 15 plants, and a lot of them are kind of slow growing, but the ones in the middle are growing fabulous, and we've been harvesting bell peppers twice a week for, like I said, a couple weeks now. But let me bring you in a little closer, because we're trying just a couple of quick trials with the bell peppers to see how they're going to do, and so let me show you that. All right, so right here, and I've done this with about, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 plants. So like 5 places I'm trying this. So if you can see right here, my drip tape is in the middle. This is planted not quite a double row. It's actually very concise. It's about 5 inches. So about 3 inches, 2.5, 3 inches off of either side of that drip tape on the emitter. And then 2 feet away, I have, again, doing the same thing. 2 plants basically growing together. You know, if you've ever experienced or used drip tape, if you had, you know, if you're putting 1 plant on the emitter, basically I've put 2, 1 on each side of the emitter. The reason for that is that my wife read an article. I think she read one or saw an article somewhere of kind of an old-time farmer, if you will, who said that he always grew his peppers, he double planted them, and he let them grow together. And what he said is that by letting them grow together, they support each other, and therefore he never used trellising. Never thought about doing it that way, so we're going to try it. These plants are growing a little slow. You can see the one obviously is putting on some bell peppers. Oops, sorry for the out of focus there. You can see the one putting on bell peppers. But we're going to see how this technique ends up going. I don't know if it's because this area stays a lot in the shade in the morning and they're not growing as fast as the other ones, but I'm hoping that they'll grow out through the year and we'll get a very good understanding of whether you can plant basically 2 plants in the same exact spot for all intensive purposes and let them grow together, and whether you actually, whether they'll hold each other up, as the old-time farmer claimed. Unfortunately, I don't know the article, and my wife couldn't get back to it again, so I don't know how to tell you to go find the article to see, you know, what all he said. But at any rate, like I said, we're trying this with 5 different double plantings, if you will, just to see, you know, because you don't want to do it with just one set. You need multiple sets to kind of have a better understanding. But let me show you one more little technique I'm trying on the bell peppers. And here I have my drip tape there, and so I am, whoop, went the wrong way with the camera, my apologies. So I have the drip tape here, and I am doing an offset. So they're planted on every emitter, but they're 6 inches off the emitter on either side of the drip tape, giving me an offset planting. So I'm going to see if doing a double row planting in an offset style, if that allows me to grow more peppers in a smaller space and or help support each other. You know, one of the things that we're always trying to figure out is how we can get plants to grow well but support each other to where we don't need to necessarily do the trellising. Well, all right, folks, that'll do it for today's video. I would really appreciate you leaving some comments and or asking questions, if you want, on how you do trial and error growing techniques. What have you learned? What have you experienced? Because part of this is for all of us to try to learn something and be able to grow more food in tighter spaces, depending on whatever conditions you have to grow in. Again, though, all of mine are based on drip tape. So if you're not using drip tape, that may or may not change some of the ways that you could do trial and error that I've done. Sorry, the gnats are terrible this morning. It's like 8 o'clock Saturday morning, and it's already humid as all get out. I've been sweating, and the gnats are just extremely terrible. Also, I'll just give a quick mention and shout out. Behind me are those row of Corinto cucumbers that I've talked about in previous videos. They are still going strong, still putting on tons of fruit. They don't seem to care about the heat. A few of them are starting to die out, but that's to be expected. I mean, we're already here in the first weekend in July, and that's to be expected. But as far as them putting on fruit, them growing great, they're still going strong. I couldn't be more pleased with those Corinto cucumbers. So if you had a question mark about using, buying some seed and doing such a thing, I give it 2 thumbs up. We've produced a lot. They've been great in our market. People love them because they stay consistently long, dark green cucumbers. Excellent cucumbers. So I couldn't speak more highly of those. If I have any negative, obviously, it's the price. But, and those are found on Johnny Seeds, in case you wanted to know. So anyway, I hope that all of this has kind of made you think about what you do to grow, you know, your fruits and vegetables, and how you might want to do some trial and error. And I'm always looking for feedback, because clearly it's experimental, right? If you don't know and you've not tried something, you don't know what you can do until you try it. So, yeah. So just thank you so much for watching this video as always. Y'all are always a tremendous blessing to me when you watch the video and comment and like the video. I am just so thankful beyond measure. So until we see you again next time, take care. God bless you. Have an amazing day in the Lord.